recorded live.
Hello and good evening to the University of UCADIA talk show. I'm your host, Franco Collins, this Wednesday, the 19th of October 2011. And I welcome all of you to come onto the call tonight that are listening through TalkShoe. And I welcome all those who will be listening to the call later through universityofUcadia.info. That's university.ucadia.info. We have some exciting information to talk to with you tonight. I want to follow up tonight on the updates of the DETA certificate, the certificate of acknowledgement, which we've been discussing, and which came out of the research on the recording of wills and testament now several months ago. We'll also be talking about the birth certificate and the fact that we now have a remedy where we can actually re-record the birth certificate as property to the estate. And we'll be talking about that as well. I also wanted to share with you some information about promissory notes and how the information that we're discussing in terms of will and testament, the example, the recording of the will and testament, then the birth certificate, how this can all lead to our ability to finally get some remedy in terms of promissory notes ahead of any tracing in their system. I want to share with you and I want to discuss this question of public record because we've mentioned it. We've mentioned quite a bit about the public record, and of course we have a public record when we speak of UCADIA. But I want to talk about actually what is the public record and what are we distinguishing between the corporate and the public. And I want to talk to you about the bankruptcy cycle of 70 years for the estates and 10 years for the corporations and how this ties into their rules of registration of bills of sale and title. And then I want to talk to you about October the 31st and what we're planning to do. A thing called the Ritus Verum, or the 144 Truths, and how this ties into the almost 500-year anniversary of Martin Luther and what he did with his 95 Thesis. So as always, there is a lot to get through, and the format, just for those that might be new to the call, the format is that for this first hour and a few minutes, I will get through those topics with you. And then in the second hour and a half, I invite you to ask your questions. So I ask you, please hold back your questions until that second hour. Type in the word question or press star or #8, and I would love to hear from you. As always, when we speak about this information, all of this information is derived from research. It's derived from sharing information that comes to us. And it is not meant to be legal advice. Always, always consider very carefully what you're doing. And don't simply take this as advice. Always seek other opinions, and let's get started. I want to start by talking about the Certificate of Acknowledgement and the research that we uncovered now many months ago on the recording and the certificate of recording in their system. What is it? Why is it important? And I want to raise it because there has been now quite a bit of excitement around the internet, and there are a number of people that have taken the information from UCADIA, are claiming it as their own, which we don't make rules and say that you have to mention UCADIA, but there are people who have taken the registration knowledge, the certificate knowledge, the acknowledgement knowledge, and now claim it as their own, but they're presenting it without giving any provenance to the information, any understanding, any comprehension and competence to the use of that knowledge. And that concerns me greatly. So I want to talk about that so we get back to the reason why certificates of acknowledgement, and why without them, without proper certificates of title, we have been getting things recorded without any real effect. And the reason I want to share that is because of this explosion of interest, and because there are people who are once again back into the old school game of saying, believe me, I am the guru, I am the Messiah, you don't need to be competent, just point and click. We're back to the bad old days where people are simply accepting remedy, doing it, they're doing without knowledge and without competence. The UCADIA is and has always been about competence. It has always been about restoring law. And while people who come and listen and unfortunately have gone away and are being dishonest, the real problem, the real crime, is that they are promoting incompetence and they're not giving provenance. So let's talk about the provenance. What we're speaking about is when one goes to a recorder, one goes to a land office and seeks to find remedy against a bank, against someone that is claiming property, one that's trying to get you kicked out of your home, one that is trying to pretend that you're intestate without a valid will, that we discovered that the recording process is the key to the commercial system today. If one obtains a perfected certificate of acknowledgement, certificate of title, and one has that properly stamped and recorded, then one has then title and is able to defeat a bank, an institution that does not have title. And what we discovered is that what they give us is not a proper certificate of acknowledgement if we don't ask, is not a certificate of title. What they give us are copies, abstracts. They don't give us what we need. Where does this come from? Well, it actually comes from the origin of what is their instruments in the first place. And what their instruments are in the first place is it's all based on indulgences. Later on tonight, we're going to be talking about what we're doing on the 31st of October. And the 31st of October is significant in history because almost 500 years ago, a fellow by the name of Martin Luther issued his now famous 95 Thesis against the very thing we're talking about, indulgences. And if you ask someone today about indulgences, they'll say, well, that's some medieval financial instrument created by the Roman cult, the Catholic Church, to effectively sell credits to heaven or sell something relating to credits or sins or selling the forgiveness of sins. What most people don't realize is indulgences haven't disappeared. Every financial instrument issued under the Western system is at its heart an indulgence. And an indulgence has two components, the remission and the remittance. Now you might have seen the word remittance on certain bills, large instrumentalities, or you may know it as its other common name, a receipt, or another common name for it, a certificate, the remittance. Those are the two key operative components apart from the prayer built into the remission. Every negotiable instrument today remains at its heart a indulgence. And in fact, the Roman cult, their canon law states quite openly that indulgences still are in effect today. Indulgences are alive and well. You can go and see the law that drives them today. It's all in plain sight. And what we've been doing is we've been focusing on the first part, which is perfecting the deed, the remission, and forgetting about the second part that completes the deal, the remittance. And I'm sorry, because we raised indulgences and we spoke about the question of indulgences over a year ago. But it was only in the discovery and trying to provide remedy for you as we complete UCADIA in the area of will and testament and in the Uncovering of the Wills Act that state quite clearly that unless a will is recorded, you do not have a valid will, that we discovered the trick of how they are converting all of us into a state of intestate, where we are regarded as not only being dead, but dead and having no will. And it is what is going on with recording. Now, last week, I explained to you that the word record actually means the process of creating property, because the word record comes from two Latin words, res and cordis, property and cordis, cordis meaning body, mind, soul, heart. So the word record actually means to record, to create property. So recording is the ritual that creates a property. If I take a notice and I get it recorded, I've created property. If I take a deed, all the deed is doing is acknowledging and perfecting an event. That's all the deed is doing, is perfecting an event, perfecting the intent, perfecting the agreement. But the property is created not by the deed, but in their system by the recording of the deed. And this is what the corporate system in their world is all based upon, the recording. If it's not recorded, then it has no existence. And this is an important difference between their old world, which their instruments are based on, their rituals are based on, the old world of the notary public, who held documents in due course. And some of you may know that holding documents in due course is the origin of what we would call now the public record. And they held them in what was called a folio, and they were supposed to record that each of those documents. So it was the notary then that did the ritual of the record, the creating of property in their own folio. And then what they did is they used a centralization of records following the bankruptcy of the British Empire through to create the concepts that we see today through the Rothschilds taking control from 1816 onwards. When they centralized their records, then that whole process then became central. And no longer did the notary and the notarization of documents play a central role in the creation of property. It all became centralized to what we're dealing with today and the creation of the corporate registers. So when we obtain a certificate of acknowledgement, when we request a certificate of acknowledgement, and when the top part of that provides to us an extract of what has been put into their record, then what we have is we have a perfected certificate of title, because title merely means an extract of the record, an extract of the name. And when we have the notarized certificate of acknowledgement, we have a perfected certificate. We have perfected ownership. And what we've learnt is that we need to make sure that we have witnesses to the event. We need to make sure that it is notarized to prove. We need to ensure that we get an extract of the record from them, from their record, so we have a true extract. And we need to combine this together into an instrument. Now, unfortunately, the same people who have taken the knowledge and the research that comes from many of you, as I am merely aggregating a lot of the research that comes, not only have they taken that research and claimed it as themselves to become their own guru, but they are also using terms like living man and living woman to claim that the system will recognize you as a living man and living woman. In fact, what they're doing is they're pressing the buttons out there in terms of free men and free women, in terms of people who have followed the sovereign movement, to try and whip up their guru status. The system will not recognize you as a living man and living woman. It will not recognize you. UCADIA does, but the system won't. Even if you get a document with it stamped, you're merely putting words in that will cause documents ultimately to be withdrawn.